Scarcity, right? So let's read the options together, and then you will tell me your answer, and I'll tell what I think is the answer, and then we'll check towards the end. Scarcity affects low-income earners only. Scarcity forces individual to make choices. Scarcity is removed by periods of falling prices. Scarcity will be abolished by advances in technology. Right. So what is the definition of scarcity? What is correct about scarcity? Okay, what do you think is the answer? You think it's B? I also think it's B, right? So let's write this down, right? So for 1, we both think it's B. Okay, great. Next we have, okay, which label must be used on a production possibility curve? Which labels must be used on the production possibility curve? Right. On the y-axis, it's capital input, labor input, cost of production, quantity produced, output of rice, labor input, output of rice, output of sugar. Yeah. So for 2, you think it's D. I also think it's D, right? So just a second. So for 2, we are saying it's D, right? Okay, great. Let's move on to the next one. As BPG shows output of 2 products a country can make. Exactly. It's not about the inputs. It's not about how many inputs you are putting into the system. It shows you only how much is the output that you get, quantity of the goods. A good's defining quality is that its consumption by one person prevents its consumption by someone else. How is this good classified? A good's defining quality is that its consumption by one person prevents its consumption by someone else, right? So how is this good classified? Right. Now this is a tricky one. What do you think? Right? D, as private goods are excludable. Excellent, right? So by the way, it's talking more about, it's talking about more about non-rivalry, right? Because what is non-rivalry? Rivalry is when, exactly, rivalry, bilkul. So private goods we know are excludable and rivalry, right? And what it means, excludable means that you can stop anyone from consuming the good. So excludable would mean that you can stop anyone from using the product, right? So just think about this. So if it's your phone or your car or your house, then you can stop anyone from entering it. So private goods are excludable. Secondly, private goods are also rivalry. Rivalry means that if more people start using the good, it reduces the good for other people. So if more people are consuming a product, it reduces the quantity available for other people. Whereas public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalry. Consumption by one person diminishes that thing for other people. Absolutely, absolutely. That's correct, right? Okay. So that was the third one. What is the fourth one? What is a normative economic statement? What is a normative economic statement, right? Money is least liquid form of wealth. Some firms are subsidized by the government. Some workers earn more than others. Taxes are the best way to discourage smoking. Normative statement, we know normative is anything that's an opinion, right? So it's an opinion. It's not a fact. It's not something that you can verify. It is an opinion. So what is a normative economic statement? So what do you think? Out of these 4, which statement is an opinion? What do you think? Yeah. Okay, so D, exactly, right? The best way. So think about this. The easiest way to identify whether it's an opinion or not, you just look at the wording that they're using, the best way, right? So when it says the best way, then you can tell that it's an opinion, right? Okay, so the price of an international athletics tournament was $50. All tickets were sold. Which area on the diagram represents consumer service? Which area on the diagram? Hello, Arbab. How are you? Walaikum Assalam. How are you? Okay, so Arbab, we are doing this past paper, and what we are doing, basically what we'll do for all of the MCQs, we'll read the MCQ together. You will tell me the answer that you think is correct. I will tell you the answer, and then we'll write it down. And then towards the end, we'll look at the answer and then see if we got it correct or incorrect. Okay, so we are doing question number 5. The price of a ticket for an international athletic, which paper? So it's a relatively new one. It's October, November 19. It's October, November 19. So the price of a ticket for an international athletics tournament was $50. all tickets were sold, which area on the diagram represents consumer surplus? So this straight vertical line is supply and this downward sloping line is demand. So which area is consumer surplus, right? So why is it C? Why is it C? Because think about this. What is the definition of consumer surplus? So consumer surplus is the area below demand curve and above price. So have a look at this. So if it looks like this, so if your market equilibrium looks like this, that straight vertical line is your supply and downward sloping is your demand. So wherever the two intersect, right? Wherever the two intersect, that will be your equilibrium price. And as I said, what is the definition of consumer surplus? Area below demand and above price. So this is below demand and this is above price. So this area is your consumer surplus. This area is your consumer surplus, right? Does it make sense? Above, is this clear? Just a second. Right, willing to pay minus actual price. Below demand and above, below demand and above, above price, right? So it's C. Okay, above, if there is any confusion in the middle, you also have to tell me which. Okay, so you. Okay, now the next question says, have a look at this. So the next question says, right, the market demand curves normally slope downwards. They may shift from D1 to either D2 or D3. What could cause a movement along D1 for good X and not a shift in D2 to D3? What would cause a movement along D1 for good X and not a shift? So what factor causes a movement along the curve? It's the price of the good falls. When the price of the good X is changing, that will cause a movement along the curve and not the shift. Price of other goods will cause a shift. Consumer incomes will cause a shift. Advertisement would also cause a shift. So price of the good is the only factor that doesn't cause a shift, right? All non-price factors cause a shift. So 6 is also C, right? 6 is also C. Just a second. Right. Okay, so the next question says, what is not a function? What is not a function of price mechanism? Right, no, I think this one is relatively easy, but otherwise it's not like that. What is not a function of price mechanism? To act as a signal to firms when allocating resources, to maximize consumer surplus, to provide incentive for firms to produce goods, to ration scarce goods. What is not a function, right? So to maximize consumer surplus, that is not the objective of price mechanism. Price mechanism, as we discussed about, yeah, that's correct. So we said prices have two mechanisms, right? So one is to allocate resources, allocative mechanism. If something is becoming more, valuable, if the price of that product is increasing, that shows that it's more profitable. So that is the thing that you want to produce, right? So that is allocative mechanism. The second, excuse me, the second function of price is to act as rationing mechanism, right? So the goods that are produced, who will buy those goods? Who decides that? The prices. So people who have the affordability are the ones who are able to buy that good. Okay, a government introduces a maximum price above the market price. What will be the effect on consumer and producer surplus? Interesting, right? To get a distinction in paper 2. Okay, so basically it's not just only paper 2. So when you get a distinction in Cambridge exams, it is combined in paper 1 and paper 2, right? So the thing is that if you score the highest marks, right, if you have kind of scored the highest marks on the exam out of all the students who took that exam, that is a distinction, right? Right. Okay, is this clear? So let's look at this question one more time. A government introduces maximum price above the market price. What will be the effect on consumer and producer surplus? What will be the effect on consumer and producer surplus? Right. So Abdul Rahim, Arbab is saying A, Abdul Rahim is saying B. Now, students, you did not read the statement carefully. A government introduces a maximum price above the equilibrium. Now, students, stay with me. Above the equilibrium. Do you remember that maximum price is used to facilitate consumers A maximum price is used to facilitate consumers, right? So for that, you have to have the price below the equilibrium. Think about this. Now, I'll show you through the graph. You will get a better idea what I mean, right? So downward sloping is your usual demand curve. Upward sloping is your usual supply curve, right? Where the two intersect, that is your equilibrium price. Any confusion so far, right? So where the two intersect, that is your equilibrium price. Now have a look at this. If consumers are already paying 100 rupees per unit, if consumers are already paying 100 rupees per product, per unit, right? And you want to facilitate consumers, if you want to help consumers, then obviously you will impose a price, maximum price below the equilibrium. You'll impose a maximum price below the equilibrium. Yes or no? Right? But the statement here says that the maximum price has been imposed above the equilibrium. So do remember, whenever maximum price is imposed above the market price, above the equilibrium price, it will have absolutely no effect on the market. It will be ineffective. Are you getting me? So if the maximum price is above the equilibrium, since that is not what the purpose of maximum price is, so that will make it ineffective. So that will make the maximum price ineffective. Yes or no? So consumer and producer surplus will be unchanged. How many of you got this? Right? So in this case, when the maximum price is above the equilibrium, so always read the question carefully, right? So the answer should be D. So let's write this down. Answer is, so it is D, right? Right, exactly. So same is the case. If minimum price is set below the equilibrium, it will be ineffective and it will have no effect on the market. It will be ineffective and it will have no effect on the market. Great. Okay, now let's move on. Next question. So the question 9 says the diagram shows the market for air travel in Asia. The initial equilibrium is at X. What will be the new equilibrium if the price of aviation fuel rises and the incomes are falling in Asia, right? So where will be the new equilibrium if price of aviation fuel, like the fuel that you put in the jets, right? Aeroplanes and so on. If the price of the aviation fuel rises and incomes are falling in Asia. So what do you think? What's the format? Like you do on your own. There it was a different thing. They had an inbuilt system. So, right? Or I can just wait for you. I mean, the problem with the time thing is, I mean, I think it's better because that depends on your pace. If you want to take more pace, you can take more time. If you want to do, some of these are very simple, so you can take less time and so on. But that was a feature on their platform. Unfortunately, we don't have that. Okay, so what do you think? Look at the question, students. Look at the question. The question says that what will be the new equilibrium if the price of aviation fuel rises and incomes are falling? So what happens when fuel price increase? What happens when fuel price increase? Since the cost of production is increasing, it will cause the supply curve to shift to the right. Do you agree with me or not? So you have quantity on the x-axis. You have quantity on the x-axis and you have price on the y-axis. Right? Okay. Now in this thing, normal downward sloping is your demand, normal upward sloping is your supply, right? Wherever the two intersect, that is your equilibrium price. So when the cost of production is increasing, because obviously now it will be more expensive to operate airline because fuel prices have increased. So supply curve will shift to the left from S1 to S2, and incomes are also decreasing. So when incomes fall, what happens? When incomes fall, your demand curve shifts to the left. Income falls, demand curve shifts to the left, right? So the new equilibrium will be somewhere over here. Is this making sense? Demand less and supply also decreases because there is, so which one did we select? We selected A, right? So 9 is A. Okay. Next question. A government increased, where is it? Sorry. A government increased a specific tax on shoes. The resulting increase in the price of shoes was paid mainly by the consumer and not by the producer. What must be true for this to happen? Think about it. Read the options. Okay. Students, do you remember we made a rule out of it? Do you remember we made a rule out of it? So you're saying A, the price elasticity of demand for is less than the price elasticity of supply. Excellent, excellent. Now stay with me. Have a look at this. So there's a rule around this. Whenever government imposes a tax, right? Who pays more burden? Who bears more burden of tax? Right? Whichever of the two, out of supply and demand, who bears more burden of tax? So out of demand and supply, whichever of the two is more inelastic, right? Who bears more burden of tax? So out of demand and supply, whichever of the two is more inelastic, that is the group that faces more burden of the tax, right? Always remember this. Out of demand and supply, because then it will be easier for the producer to transfer the burden to the consumer. Out of demand and supply, whichever of the two is more inelastic, whichever of the two is more inelastic, that bears more burden of tax, right? Is this simple? Any confusion, right? And similarly, think about this. And another way, when the government provides subsidy, who bears more, who benefits more? So when government provides subsidy, whichever of the two is more inelastic, that party that party receives more benefit of that, right? Right. Yes. Right. Similarly, for the subsidy as well, think about this. So for the subsidy, if the government is giving subsidy on any product, right, whichever of the two is more inelastic, that party will get more benefit out of it. Who receives more benefit? Receives more benefit. Right? So out of demand supply, whichever of the two is more inelastic. More inelastic, that party receives more benefit of it. Receives more benefit from subsidy. Benefit from subsidy. Is this clear, students? Right? So in the case of tax, whichever of the two is more inelastic, that party faces a more burden of it. And similarly, in the case of subsidy, whichever of the two is more inelastic, that party receives more benefit out of that. Okay, now, so the price elastic demand was less than the price elastic supply. Right, exactly. Right. The price elastic, right, exactly. So 10 should be A. Let me write this down. 10 should be 10 should be A. Okay. Now moving forward, the next one says, where is 11? Okay. The diagram shows the supply and demand for a good. The original equilibrium is at X. What will be the new equilibrium if subsidies are given to the firms for new machinery? What happens if subsidies are provided? That should be fairly simple. What would happen if subsidies are given for new machinery, right? So subsidy causes the supply curve to shift to the right. Arbab, have a look at this one more time. Do you think it's C? You think it's C? No, 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 no. Come on, think about this. How can you get this wrong? So we did talk about this. Subsidy is a financial payment that the government gives to producers. And with subsidy, what happens actually that the cost of production is decreasing because now whatever was the initial cost of producing that thing, right? Now you are being helped by the government. You are being helped by the government, right? So normal down sloping is your demand curve. Normal upward sloping is your supply curve. And when the government provides subsidy, your supply curve, since the cost of production is decreasing, your supply curve will shift to the right. So it will move it from this point to this point. Make sense? Is it simple? Right? So that is what you need to remember. Supply will increase. Exactly. Arbab, does it make sense? So yes, overall quantity is increasing. Think about this. So what you're saying, equilibrium quantity is increasing, but demand is not increasing, right? Because if the demand would have increased, there would have been a parallel shift to the right. If demand would have increased, there would have been a parallel shift, a rightward or increase in demand, but that didn't happen, right? No. It's not about elastic or inelastic, Arbab. Whenever subsidy is provided, think about it, subsidy is reducing the cost of production. Subsidy is financial payment directly to the producer. So with that, producer's cost of production is decreases, and therefore it causes a rightward shift in supply. Therefore, it causes a rightward shift. So whether demand is inelastic or more elastic, that doesn't make any difference. Got it? So it should be when the supply is shifting. Have a look at this. So when the supply shifts, your supply curve will shift over here. So from X, this will become your new supply curve and your demand curve stays the same. Your demand curve stays the same. So the new equilibrium comes over here, right? So 11 is D, right? Right. Okay, great. Let's move to the next question. Okay, so the question 12 says the diagram shows the market for normal good. The market, the diagram, where is it? Sorry. The diagram shows the market for a normal good. Down sloping is demand, upward sloping is supply. What is likely to cause both demand and supply curves to shift to right? What will cause both demand and supply curve to shift to the right? A fall in the price of the good and a fall in the rate of indirect tax. A rise in the price of complementary good and increase in the number of firms in the industry. A rise in the price of substitute goods and a fall in the price of raw material used in the production of the good, an improvement in production techniques and a fall in the incomes of consumers. So out of all these four options, in which case will both supply and demand shift to the right? Right? Okay, so Arbab, you're saying it's A. Read it one more time. Student, read it carefully and then tell me what's the correct answer. Read it one more time and tell me what's the correct answer. Yeah. So in which case would both supply and demand shift to the right? Okay, yeah. So which one do you think? D. Okay, so now Arbab, you are saying it's D. What about Abdurrahim? Abdurrahim, are you in the class? Yeah. So think about the students, you are making a big mistake over here. What will cause both demand supply curve to shift to the right, which means that both demand and supply are increasing. Now have a look at this. If yes, the answer is C, exactly. Arbab, have a look at this. A fall in the price of the good. Think about this. Whenever there's a fall in the price of the good itself, it's not a shift, it's a movement along the curve. Do you remember that? Arbab, when the price of the good is changing, when the price of the good, which we have on the graph, is changing, it will not cause a shift. It will just quantity of good is on the x-axis and you have price on the y-axis. It will just cause movement along the curve, right? So let me show you over here, right? So downward sloping is the demand curve. So if this was your original, point A, right? And then it moved from A to B, right? So have a look at this. So have a look at this, students. Just a second, right? So this shows that this much was the price and this much was the quantity demanded. And then you move from A to B. So it's a movement along the curve. So price change in the price of the good itself doesn't cause a shift, right? Now let's read the options, all the options one by one. So fall in the price of the good is incorrect, and a fall in the rate of indirect tax. Yes, if there is a fall in the rate of indirect tax, then the supply will shift to the right. If there is a fall in the indirect tax, then it means that the supply shifts to the right. That's correct. But a change in the price of the good will not cause a shift in the demand. So it's not fulfilling the entire statement that both the supply and demand curves are shift to the right, right? So A is incorrect. Then B says a rise in the price of complementary good. What will happen if the price of complementary good is increasing? So if oil prices are increasing, what will happen to the demand for cars? If oil prices are increasing, because oil and car are complementary goods, if price of oil is increasing, what will that do to the demand for cars? The demand for cars will decrease, exactly. So the demand should have increased, right? So we are talking about what will cause an increase in demand and not a decrease in demand, right? So that's again can't be correct. An increase in the number of firms in the industry. Yes, so increase in the number of firms in the industry will cause a right shift in supply. That's correct. Okay, then it says a rise in the price of substitute goods. A rise in the price of substitute good. So if the price of the substitute good is rising, if the price of the substitute good is rising, right, then obviously your demand will increase because substitute goods become more expensive. So if Pepsi is becoming more expensive, people will switch to Coke. And a fall in the price, and a fall, where is it? And a fall in the price of the raw material. So if the price of raw material is decreasing, it will cause an increase in supply. So first thing was increase in demand, of rise in the price of substitute good, right? So you will buy more of this product. And secondly, the price of raw material is also falling, so supply will also shift to the right, right? Right, exactly. And why is D incorrect? An improvement in production techniques. Okay, yes. If there's increase in production, improvement in production techniques, that will cause your supply to shift to the right. That's good. That's absolutely correct. And a fall in the price of, and a fall in the incomes of consumers. So the problem is that fall in income of consumers will cause a leftward shift in demand. So that can't be the answer. So eventually your answer is C. So 12 is C, right? 12 is C. Okay. Now the next one is, okay, 13. Where is that? 13, just a second. Yeah, here's it. Okay, the diagram shows the market for 4 different products. In which market would a 10% decrease in demand and a simultaneously 10% increase in supply definitely result in both a fall in equilibrium price and a rise in equilibrium quantity? Interesting. In which market, think about this. So the diagram shows the market for 4 products. In which market would a 10% decrease in demand, 10% decrease in demand and a simultaneously 10% increase in supply? So demand is decreasing, so demand has to shift to the left, and a 10% increase in supply. So the change in demand supply is same, would definitely result in fall in the price and a rise in equilibrium quantity, right? Fall in the price, fall in price and rise in equilibrium quantity. Okay, so the demand has to fall. Are you guys getting me how I'm doing it, students? So demand has to fall and supply has to increase, right? Demand has to fall and supply has to increase, right? So what do you think? Yeah, out of all these options, right? Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Have a look at this. So a fall in a 10% fall in demand like this, and a 10% increase in supply like this, right? So that is one way, right? Okay, have a look at this. Read the statement again. So in which market would a 10% decrease in demand and a simultaneous 10% increase in supply definitely result in both a fall in equilibrium price and a rise in equilibrium quantity? So equilibrium price should fall and equilibrium quantity should rise, right? So when demand decreases, have a look at this. Where will the demand curve shift? Demand will shift to the left. And when supply increases, where will the supply curve shift? In this case, supply curve will shift to the right. So in this case, we can see that what is happening? Equilibrium price is falling. Previously, equilibrium price was this much. Yes or no? Previously, equilibrium price was this much. Now the equilibrium price is lower than this. And equilibrium quantity is also increasing. Yes or no? Students, are you following me or not? In this case, there's a 10% decrease in demand, okay, like this, and there's 10% increase in supply. So price is definitely falling. In this case, in the case of B, price is definitely falling. But we don't know if the equilibrium quantity is increasing or not. We don't know if the equilibrium quantity would increase or not. Then in the case of C, demand will decrease and the supply will increase. So in this case, what is happening? Equilibrium price is falling. Yes, we know equilibrium price is falling, but equilibrium quantity is also falling. Equilibrium quantity is also falling. So C can't be the answer, right? Yes or no? And then in the case of D, equilibrium demand is decreasing and supply is increasing. Sorry, demand is decreasing and supply is increasing. Again, equilibrium price is falling, but equilibrium quantity is also falling. So out of all these four, which one do you think would be the correct answer? So out of these four, which of these four do you think is helping you achieve fall in equilibrium price, and rise in equilibrium quantity? Yes. Come on, students. I've already drawn. Should not be difficult, right? A and B are similar. So think about this. A and B are not exactly similar, right? The problem that I made was that I did not decrease the demand by that much. So they should have been an equal decrease, right? Let me show you. So if the demand is also falling by 10%, have a look at this. But can you see that in the case of B, we can't really tell if there has been increase in the equilibrium quantity or not, because they're still more or less in the same line. Are you getting me, Abdurrahim? So they're still more or less in the same line. But here we can totally tell that it was this equilibrium initially, and now the equilibrium is this. So it's higher. So A should be a better choice, right? Arbab, sorry, Arbab was asking me, right? So, Arbab, is this clear now? Not decrease. So that is what they're saying, a rise in the equilibrium quantity. Have a look at this, a rise in equilibrium quantity. So quantity should be, equilibrium quantity should be higher. Arbab, that is what it says. So 13 should be. So for these questions, okay, students, let me tell you, for these questions, always and always, try to make the graph and then try to find the answer, right? Because there's no way, other way of going around this. When it says what will happen if this happens, how much will be the change in equilibrium price and how much will be the change in equilibrium quantity. So always remember that you have to make the graph, you have to draw the graphs on the curves on the graph so that you can compare and then see which is the correct answer. Never try to make guesses, because there is high chance that when you make guesses, it will be incorrect. Easy? Are we good on this? Okay, great, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so let's move on. I think we should quickly go and check the answers, and then we can do the remaining later. Okay, now this is October, November 1292. This was also October, November 12, 2019. Okay, so that's the correct. So one, we selected B. What was the one? Let's have a look at this. So question 1, exactly. So this was the question. And wow, you may read it again. What is correct about scarcity? Scarcity affects low income earners only. That's the first one. Scarcity forces individuals to make choices. Scarcity is removed when, removed by periods of falling prices. Scarcity will be abolished by advances in technology, right? So the answer is B, exactly. Perfect. So let's read the question 2. Which labels might be used on a production possibility curve? So what do we have on the X and Y axis of production possibility curve? What do we have on the X and Y axis of the production possibility curve? Right. Okay. Yeah. So it is D, right? So output of rice and output of sugar. Exactly. Perfect. So let's check. B is 2 is D. What about 3? A good's defining quality is that its consumption by one person prevents its consumption by someone else. How is this good defined? So what is this quality they are talking about? Is that the consumption by one person prevents its consumption by someone else? Yeah. So the answer is D, private good, exactly, right? So 3 was D, perfect. What about 4? What is a normative statement? What is a normative statement? Normative statement we know is an opinion. What is a normative statement? Normative statement is an opinion, right? So money is the least liquid form of wealth. Some firms are subsidized by the government. Some workers earn more than others. Taxes are the best way to discourage smoking, right? D is the opinion, right? 4 is D. 5. Okay, so we were talking about this. We did talk about that. C will be the consumer equilibrium. 6, we did say that if it has to be movement along the curve, then the price of the price of the good itself has to change to cause a movement along the curve. Otherwise, there will always be a shift. So 6 should be C. 6 is C. Excellent. 7 was what is not a function of price mechanism, right? To maximize consumer surplus, right? Because all other are to act as a signal to firms when allocating resources. This is about allocative mechanism to provide incentive for firms to produce goods. Yes, that is again allocative mechanism, and to ration scarce resources. That is again allocative mechanism, right? But it is not the purpose of price mechanism to maximize consumer surplus. So 7 is B. Have a look at this. 8. A government introduces a maximum price above the market price. I did mention that if the maximum price is above the equilibrium, it will be ineffective. What will the effect on consumer and producer surplus? So consumer and producer surplus remain unchanged. Consumer surplus remain unchanged. The diagram shows the market for air travel in Asia. The initial market equilibrium is at X. What will be the new equilibrium if the price of aviation fuel? So we said that supply will shift to the left and demand will decrease. So answer should be A. 9 is A. Okay. And for this, we said that the group out of consumers and producers, whichever of the two has more inelastic demand, that is the one that will suffer more burden of the tax. The price loss to demand was less than the price loss of supply. So 10 is again A. What about 11? The diagram shows the demand and supply and demand for goods. The original equilibrium is X. What will the new equilibrium subsidy is given to firms for new machinery? So supply shifts to the right. So the answer is D. 11 is D. 12. The diagram shows the market for a normal good. What is likely to cause both demand and supply curves to shift to the right? So we said C, when the price of the substitute good is rising, that's why the demand for your good will rise. And if the price of raw material used in the production is increasing, what will that do? Sorry, a fall in the price of the raw material. So that will again cause a shift, rightward shift in supply. So the answer has to be 12 should be C. 12 is C, right? Okay, so 13 is right. I said 13 would be A. By making the graph, 13 is A, right? 14 said, why might consumers provide free education? We didn't do that. Okay, so let's do this right now. Why might governments provide free education for children between 4 to 16 years old? Consumers are not fully aware of the benefits of education. Education in free market would be overconsumed. education is a public good and there would be many free riders, the private cost of education exceeds the private benefit in the free market. Right, what do you think? A, Abdul Rahim says A. What about you, Arbab? Which one do you think is correct, right? So it's a merit good, exactly. So people are not fully aware of the benefits of education. 14 is A, right? They're not fully aware. B is incorrect. Why? Because education in the free market would be overconsumed. No, right? Underconsumed. It's always underconsumed. Merit goods are consumed less than what they should be. Education is a public good. Education is technically not a public good because you can exclude people from consuming education, right? Exactly. And the private cost of education exceeds the private benefit. No, if that would have been true, then no one ever would have gotten himself educated, right? So if people think that education is only expensive and it doesn't give you that much benefit, then people would have never gotten themselves educated. But that's not true. Quasi you can say, quasi public good you can say, right? But at least it's not a pure public good. It's not a pure public good, right? So 14 is A. Okay, now students, what you should do is that this is, I will just share this on the group. And then you can try to complete the remaining for tomorrow's class. We have done till 14 and the remaining 14 are left. So the way it will help us. So if you're doing MCQs on your own as well, it will be more effective in the sense that we will only be discussing the most important ones. We will only be discussing the most important or the most difficult MCQs. From important, I mean the most difficult ones, rather than discussing all those, right? Are you getting me? So if you can attempt it for tomorrow's class, then we'll only discuss the difficult one. And if you're doing MCQs on your own, you can bring it to the class so that we can discuss it. Regarding, right, yes, do that, do that, and I'll answer that, and I'll see you tomorrow at the same time. So now we are coming at the same time tomorrow. We will have a class, even though there's a holiday. I have a topical book of MCQs should I go through. Right, Arbab, yeah, you had a preference for topical MCQs. I would say that you should, and start off with the topics that you have more problem in. Start with the topics. So if let's say you think that inflation is more difficult, then start off with inflation and balance of payment and exchange rate, or whatever topic you think is more difficult, and then come back to the less difficult ones. And any question that you do not understand, take a picture of that and send it to me, right? Send it to me over the group and I'll answer that, right? Okay, so I'll quickly tell you, Abdul Rahim. So for paper two of business, paper 2 is the case study one, right? So in that they test on all the concepts. They will test you on human resource, motivation theories. They'll test you on marketing, all the 4 P's of marketing. They'll test you on operations. For operations, I think it is about the stock management. I don't know. Operations about efficiency and all that, right? So that is what you need to know. And then also the financial part, the ratios and all that, right? Does it make sense? So that is what you need to do. Right? Are we good on this? Right? Okay. So I'll see you tomorrow. A problem with marketing. What type of question? So just share your question, Abdul Rahim, and then I'll answer you in the group. Right? Whatever specific problem you have with the marketing or any concept, just share it and I'll answer that. Right? So I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night. Allah Hafiz.